One of the terms that's used throughout the call to action and that you'll hear a lot about at General Conference is this phrase, adaptive challenge. Now, I first became familiar with this reading some of the literature of Ronald Heifetz, who wrote Leadership on the Line and Leadership Without Easy Answers and a host of other materials like that. And to understand what an adaptive challenge is, we've got to contrast it and compare it to a technical challenge. Now, Heifetz says a technical challenge is a challenge that an organization faces where we know what the problem is and we know what the solution is. And so, therefore, our task is to apply the solution to the problem. That's a technical challenge. On the other hand, an adaptive challenge is one where we don't know what the problem is, and so we've got to do some learning just to figure out what the problem is in the first place. And then we don't know what the solution is, and we've got to learn our way toward a solution. Now let me compare how this might look in a local church. Suppose that there's a leaky roof. Now that's a technical challenge. Everybody knows what the problem is. The roof is leaking. And everybody knows what the solution is. We're going to have to replace the roof. Now we may have to discuss at some length about how it's going to get funded or this, that, or the other, but we know what the problem is and we know what the solution. There's an expert out there who can do this for us, and he's called a roofer. And also, when we have solved the technical challenge, we're back to where we were when we began, okay? We've just restored things to the way they were. That's a technical challenge. Now compare that problem. There's a leaky roof. We know what the problem is. We know what the solution is. We just apply the solution to the problem. Compare that to this problem, this challenge. There are no children in this church anymore. There are simply no young people around. Now, what's the problem? What's the challenge? There are no young people because of what? Because of the pastor? Because of the location of the church? Because of the demographics in the community? Because of the worship style and music of the congregation? Because of the attitude of the congregation? Which of these things is the reason we don't have any children around here anymore? What's the real problem? Well, you see that it's probably some mix of all of those things. And so the congregation's going to have to do some real learning just to figure out what the problem is, let alone what the solution is. That's the difference between a technical problem, a technical challenge, and an adaptive challenge. Now, Heifetz would suggest that the biggest mistake that an organization can make is to confuse what an adaptive challenge is and a technical. And so what happens when there are no children around, no young people anymore, is we think, well, you know, it worked when we changed out the roof, that fixed that problem. If we just change out the pastor, then that will solve this problem. But it's not a technical challenge, it's an adaptive one that the whole congregation has to learn its way through. Heifetz goes on to say that the role of leadership is to mobilize people to meet the adaptive challenges that are essential for the mission of the organization. The call to action has identified this as our adaptive challenge. How do we redirect the flow of energy, resources to increase the number of vital congregations? And so that's what they put before us, that if we don't figure this out, if we don't learn our way through this, it's going to continue to have just an extraordinary impact on diminishing our mission. And that's what's meant by the word adaptive challenge. The call to action, does it suggest that we have all the answers to this? Absolutely not. What it suggests is we're going to have to do a great deal of learning to figure out what the problem really is, and then we're going to have to go through the changes of behavior and value and attitude. Everyone is going to have to experience a fundamental shift in how we do ministry. And so if you think that this is about your pastor, the call to action is about your pastors need to change, or your cabinet, or your bishop, or your church members, or your elected leaders, or your general agencies, and not about you, then you're not accepting the adaptive challenge. Because the test of an adaptive challenge is that it requires not just that those people over there change, it requires that something change inside each one of us.